Want an easy way to see if you could save money on car insurance? Geico gives you 3. Call 1-800-947-AUTO. Go online to geico.com or stop by the Geico office nearest you. 3 ways you could save 15% or more.
This is the best of Mike and Mike podcast. Subscribe now by going to the Listen tab in the ESPN app.
The best of Mike and Mike.
And we are back and better than ever. Good morning, Mike and Mike with you on ESPN Radio and on ESPN2, where, as we speak, the first fascinating move of the 2017 football season has been made, complete with super high stakes, big names, big risk, and no shortage of controversy. Away we go into football, big fella, as Jay Cutler today will sign a contract to become the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins.
Boy, oh boy, go away for a few days and all hell breaks loose. Jay Cutler, we're gonna not get to see him start in the broadcast booth. Back on the field again, seems to be having to be prodded into it, I should say. All we talked about was Colin Kaepernick. He's going to need a big injury for him to get a chance now to play after the whole Baltimore Ravens situation. And there's a big injury, and turns out to be some bad luck as far as who the coach is down there and who he had coached previously. Jay Cutler, we got a whole lot to get into there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if we thought that there was going to be a quarterback that might come out of the broadcast booth this year, maybe we thought it would be Tony Romo.
Right.
Going back to Dallas, that's not the case.
By the way,
going to Miami.
Did you see the shed he was practicing in? And you were out of the country, so you probably didn't.
But I've seen some stuff.
The Hall of Fame game?
Yeah.
He was practicing. They were doing a practice announcing team, and they were like in some shed, like 70 yards away from the field. Chris Collinsworth was joking. It's like, I don't even know how he sees the field from there. You look in there, and there was like plywood in there. They set like a tube up in there that sometimes we'll have under our seat for air conditioning.
Yeah.
To go into the building. It was very makeshift for his practice there. But you're right. He was the one we thought if there was a major injury, maybe, depending on the team, would he be talked out of retirement? But it was Jay Cutler and an 8-figure salary.
And that's where we're going to begin here after we go off the top. And let's take you through some of the top stories in sports. It begins with the L.A. Dodgers.
Wow.
Let's just, Mike, there's no other way to say it. They're the best baseball team we've ever seen. No team has played at a clip the way they're playing over the last 2 months or so in our lifetime. They beat the Mets yesterday. What they did to the Mets in this series, Mike, would be considered like a criminal act in 43 states.
Overall in the series, they finished 7-0 against the Mets this season. First time they've ever swept a season series against New York. They outscored the Mets by 42 runs in 7 games. They finished this last series with 10 home runs in 3 games. It's just ridiculous. But listen, the Mets just happen to be the team in the way right now. What you said before is what we're seeing out of them. So you want to talk about we're going to finish this regular season and there's going to be nothing on anybody's minds associated with the Dodgers of we had better win the World Series. We got to get Kershaw back and we got to see what he's going to be like, when he gets back. They pick up Darvish in the trade, something that happened while we were both gone.
Yeah.
See where that's going to go, but they got to get Kershaw back without question, and Kershaw is going to have to pitch better in the postseason than he has. But the way they're playing right now, talk about overwhelming favorites they're going to be going into the postseason is ridiculous.
44-7 in their last 51
Off the top,
games. Meanwhile, happy birthday today to one of the great young stars in sports, who is only one day away from having the best birthday you could have. And that's Mike Trout, who is 26 years old today.
Doesn't it feel like he should be 40? We've been talking about him forever because he's been great for what would be really the short time he has been in this league. It's ridiculous. The last player to record his 1,000th hit on his birthday, and that's what he's looking to do. He's one shy of joining the 1,000 hit club. The last person to do it, 1998, Hal Morris, when he turned 33. Now, last year on his birthday, didn't do too well. It was 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. Not the greatest thing in the world there, but he's off to one of the best starts to his career we've ever seen. Ty Cobb, the only position player in baseball history with a better WAR through the age of 25. He's ahead of guys like Roger Hornsby and Mickey Mantle and great names like that. Only Ty Cobb ahead of him. The guy, I mean, you want to talk about two of the, obviously him and Bryce Harper, the two young stars we talk about, but it seems like Trout has been in the league forever.
So does,
off the top,
it seemed, with Sidney Crosby, who himself celebrates a birthday today. Sidney Crosby is 30 years old. And another one because he came up so young and he's been in the middle of so much so quickly. He's another one that if you had just closed your eyes and said, how old is Sidney Crosby, I would have guessed older than 30.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's his day with the Cup, the Stanley Cup, after winning the Stanley Cup at his home province of Nova Scotia. He'll have it around there. He turns 4 days after Tom Brady turned 40. Crosby's 1,027 career points before turning 30 ranks 12th in NHL history. He's one of 8 players in NHL history to record 1,000 points and win 3 Stanley Cups before his 30th birthday. The other 7 all in the Hall of Fame, which is exactly where Sid the Kid's going to end up.
I think if there's one thing that we've learned from this conversation, it is that all the really great ones are born in August.
Oh, God. We're going to have to talk about that, aren't we?
Off the top.
The Falcons' Jalen Collins has been suspended 10 games for PEDs. Mike, it's the second straight year Atlanta will have to do at least some of the season without its terrific young corner.
Second rounder, 215 out of LSU, admitted to a couple of violations at LSU for marijuana. Now, last year, he missed the first 4 games of the season for a PED violation. That's why it's 10 this time around. Guy's got some issues, no doubt about it. I mean, especially with the PEDs, 2 years in a row, now going to miss all these games. He can be with the team through the preseason. Once the regular season starts, that's going to be it for being around. Guy ended up with 2 interceptions last year, a team that went to the Super Bowl. They were really going to be counting on this guy.
Yeah, he's a good player.
Without question, counting on this guy, and he just cost himself and obviously his teammates as well.
And a bunch of money, too. His salary this year was just under $1 million. He's going to lose over half of that. So there are a lot of ramifications to this. Little tiny pinpricks to a team's season that begin early on, and that's one that certainly doesn't help a team coming off a devastating Super Bowl loss. And then, of course, there are the bigger, higher-profile moves like quarterback moves, and that's where we began with Jay Cutler, who agrees yesterday to a 1-year, $10 million deal with the Dolphins, $3 million in incentives. We're going to get into all the details for you here. He will show up in Miami. He had a previously scheduled engagement yesterday that he couldn't break, so he's actually getting there this morning. He'll take a physical, which no one expects to be an issue. Will sign today and should start practicing tomorrow.
What great leverage. Hey, you want to come play quarterback? Nah, I don't think so. How about for, $6-7 million? Nah, I'm going to go in the booth. How about $8-9 million? Nah, not really. I'm going to really start talking. $10 million? Okay, I'm good. All right, let's get me in.
It's a really interesting situation.
It is. I mean, which he had all the leverage in the world if he wanted to come back.
Assuming if he really didn't mind not playing, which it seems he didn't mind.
Right.
He had an excellent next gig. Mm-hmm. He is a guy who I have a feeling is going to be a sneaky good broadcaster, and what I mean by that is he's not someone that when he was playing you would ever have said he's going to be a great broadcaster. No. I just have a feeling he's going to be good.
I mean, I have no idea. Him and Tony Romo were the 2 newbies this year, and Tony Romo looks like he's actually going to do the broadcasting job. And Cutler, we're just talking about reports, and we'll get into all that about he was leaning toward not. Was that just a leverage play to get the most money he could? But 1 year at $10 million, not a bad deal. I guarantee he wasn't getting $10 million from Fox to be in the booth.
No, that's for sure. Off the Top with Mike and Mike is brought to you by Zyppah. Go to Zyppah.com. That's spelled ZYPPAH.com. Get a Zyppah so you can stop snoring and enjoy the summer. So there you have it. The Miami Dolphins will be spending the second most money of any team in the NFL this season on quarterbacks, second only to the Chicago Bears. And there is a not so subtle irony in that, of course, the Chicago Bears were the team that didn't want Jay Cutler anymore. In fact, couldn't wait to get rid of Jay Cutler. And now Adam Gase, with whom he did. I will admit this, because everyone has been waiting on the Kaepernick thing and to see where that goes. And the assumption has been, a team will get an injury at quarterback and then they'll look at him closely. And for a while it looked like it was going to be Baltimore, and now it seems to have pivoted away there. And now you hear Miami. The moment I heard the report about the injury to Tannehill, my first thought was Cutler. It was not Kaepernick.
There's no doubt about it.
In this unique case because of Adam Gase.
It absolutely was Cutler. We had talked about Cutler before he said he was retiring and going into the booth, and he had talked about the fine line of retirement, of are you really done with football? Are teams just saying you're done with football? If he wasn't getting a chance to be a starter somewhere, he was one of the names we mentioned before his retirement that he may wait for an injury to be able to come back. He wasn't going to be handed a starting job. He was going to go somewhere, so he could kind of have his, if he felt it was a good situation, he would come back. If not, he would take advantage of other opportunities. In this case, it would be the broadcast booth. But I'm with you. And I've heard so much, obviously, with us both gone when this happened, so much talk about, oh, my God, they should have signed Colin Kaepernick. What's the deal? And I'm with you. The first name I thought of was Cutler. Cutler had a great year. Well, great year.
He had a better year, yeah.
Statistically, it was his highest rated year. Let me put it that way. He had a little over 92 rating, which was the highest of his career. But he was 6-9 as a starter, 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 64% completion. This was under Adam Gase in Chicago. So that's exactly what I thought as well. I thought, well, I don't know what he's been doing. If he says he was retired and getting ready for the broadcast booth, I doubt he was out every day doing, quarterback things. But, he's played it for a long time. I got to believe he's going to pick it up. And one of the biggest barriers getting out there is verbiage and language. And he steps in and he knows the language. He steps in right now and he absolutely knows the language. It really is like learning a different language if you don't know the system. So that's the ease now that they have. They don't have to worry about that part of it. It's just going to be kicking off the rust and getting him. They have some time. You got obviously 4 preseason games to work through whenever he's going to jump into those and start working his way in. But I'm with you. He's the first name I thought of as well.
The other thing that I think it helps here is this doesn't happen a week before the season starts. It happens a week before the first preseason game.
Right.
So if he isn't in the greatest football shape, he's got time. He's got a month to get himself ready for that. I know these days guys work out throughout the entire offseason, but he has plenty of time to get himself in good shape.
He does.
The circumstance that this is most reminiscent of, I guess, in recent memory, is Minnesota last year.
Right.
Remember, and they lose Bridgewater way later in the game than this is.
They do.
In the calendar, and they wind up having to make a huge move to sign. They trade a first-round pick to get Sam Bradford.
The difference there is Bradford was playing football, and Bradford was, in the game and not out. You weren't pulling someone from who was going to start their new career. So I'm sure that's a thought process there. But he will. And listen, they have a lot of the guys like Matt Moore down there. Matt Moore is going into his 7th year in Miami. I don't know if people really know that. He was with Carolina for a few years. Now his 7th year in Miami. Last year was the most starts he had when Tannehill got hurt. He had 4 starts last year. There's some people that like him down there and feel pretty good about him, kind of that interim guy. Well, Jay Cutler's going to eventually be the starter there, but Matt Moore, I think they like what he can bring them if he has to come off the bench, and we'll see. And then the division they're in, Cutler is 0-3 against New England, got blasted by them. I mean,
everybody's 0-3 against New England. I was just going to say,
yeah. I think a winning record against New York. I think 500 against the Buffalo Bills. So we'll see. So
he's actually unbeaten against the Jets.
Yeah, well,
because
I didn't want to.
He's winless against the Patriots. He's unbeaten against the Jets, and he's 500 against the Dolphins.
You just had a birthday yesterday. I didn't want to rub it in.
No,
too quickly.
Listen, that's low on my list of concerns. Here's the thing: is that Matt Moore there were 2 outcries with the signing of Cutler. One of them was very quiet, comparatively speaking, and the other one was very loud. The loud one was Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
Why didn't they sign him? We'll talk about that. That's a much bigger conversation. The very quiet one was from the small group of people who said, Matt Moore's never gotten a chance. We want to see him. Well, guess what? He'll get his chance.
Yes, he will.
I mean, right now, you haven't made a commitment to Jay Cutler that says, well, he's now the quarterback for the rest of my life. I don't know what the future is of Ryan Tannehill. They actually don't owe him any money after this season if they don't want to. So they can actually pull the plug on Tannehill if they want to. If Matt Moore plays great, he has a chance to be the quarterback of that team? Absolutely. I mean, they signed Cutler to come in there, and I think in Gaze's mind, he'll become the starter, but it's not as though they've hitched their horse to that wagon in such a significant way. If Matt Moore plays lights out, he'll be the quarterback.
Yeah, Matt Moore will get his shot. As I mentioned, 4 starts last year, 63%, 8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. They do like him there, 7th year there. So, yeah, he will get his opportunity there, and the Cutler thing is a 1-year deal. It's a deal, to get through to then you see what's going to happen with Tannehill, because from that story, a lot of people going back to last year when he heard it, why didn't he just have the surgery?
Right.
Remember.
Why didn't he?
Well,
I didn't even realize this had happened until I was reading it last week, and they decided to treat it with rest, which I know you said to me a million times, if you can avoid surgery, you do it.
Yeah, you don't want to have, foreign objects in your body. I mean, the last thing in the world you want to do is get cut on. But there's a line.
Although, actually, maybe the last thing you want to do is, in a non-contact injury before the season even starts the following year, hurt it again.
Well, that's the risk they obviously took. So you either go in and repair it, and now you've had a surgery on your knee, or you try and let it heal because you missed the last 4 games, then you have the entire offseason to let it mend more. So I understand, hindsight's always 20/20. It was a partial tear, so it was one of those where you had the line. I mean, when you have something set up surgery, get in there, repair it, start the rehab. We know you'll be back in 8, 9, 10 months, whatever it's going to be. Get that thing going and start on it. Or it's, we're not too, because we see it a lot. As I said, surgeries, a lot of times guys will hold off. We did it all the time. If you can, you hold off on it, and then in January you basically form a line. You form a line and you get surgery, whether you have to get cut or what we would call an oil change. You'd get scoped, you get the floater sucked out of there, you start training and you get ready for next year. So, or if it's a little more intense than that, then you have to make a decision. Do I have the surgery or do I just let it heal? I give it some time to let it heal. The problem you run is you hear about guys in May saying, well, now they have to have surgery because they tried to let it heal. It didn't heal like they wanted to, so then they have surgery. So then they're backed up a few more months. So it's a tough line it's a balancing act there. And this one they lost. This one you can look back and say, my God, he was just running out of bounds, has the knee brace on. He steps, you can see it's a little awkward step, and here we are, could be gone for the season. So you immediately think, well, why didn't you get it repaired last year? As I said, hindsight is 20/20. I get the situation where you say, I have time. Let's let this thing heal and see if it can heal on its own.
All right, we're Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. More independent agents sell Progressive Insurance than any other brand. Find an agent at Progressive.com. Now that's Progressive. Let's go through some of the stuff from our insiders. Our NFL reporter is Jeff Darlington talking about Jay Cutler, and to the point you just made, Mike, he said there isn't any question in the mind of the coach, Cutler's coming in to be the starter.
Cutler knew coming in that he's coming in for a starting role. Gase has made that clear to him, and that does make for a little bit of a sticky situation with Matt Moore because Moore is a very popular guy in the locker room and obviously has seemingly earned his stripes with the Miami Dolphins. But the Dolphins more comfortable with Cutler coming in to be their starter for a 16-game season. I do anticipate that Cutler will be the starter as soon as he can get up to speed. And that is why the Dolphins were willing to sign him to that $10 million deal with $3 million in added incentives.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Again, everybody has their first preseason game, save for the 2 teams that played in the Hall of Fame game. The first preseason, I think it starts Wednesday. Carolina and somebody play, I forgot who it is, Carolina and Houston, I believe, play on Wednesday. So they get going, and Matt Moore will, Cutler isn't going to take the number 1 reps today. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But he does know the system, so he can work into it a lot quicker. There's going to be getting in some football shape that has to go on as well. But that's life, man. I mean, Matt Moore has basically been a backup his entire career. He has been a backup his entire career. Back in 2011, he played 13 games for Miami, 4 last year. So he's 32 years old. Cutler is 34 years old. I mean, that's business, man. I mean, everybody knows Cutler's going to come in and be the guy. There may be some guys in that locker room that say, hey, Matt Moore, why don't you give him a chance? But the bottom line is if Jay Cutler's in the pocket, the other guys are going to play. The other guys are going to do their thing. Nobody's going to be dejected and not play well, and there's going to be some big controversy. It's just not going to happen.
They're a good team, too. They're a sneaky, I'll use that again. It's the second time I've used that word this morning. They're a sneaky good team. They have sneaky good receivers. They have a guy in Jay Ajayi who, when last season began, no one had ever heard of. And by the end of the season, he's one of the most productive running backs in the league. They've got a good offensive line with Pouncey coming back from injury.
Yeah,
They've got a big D-line.
They just had an injury on their O-line. Which
how bad?
Out. I believe it was a torn bicep with Larson's. Paul Carr, you can tell. I think it was a bicep, so he's going to be gone. But to your point,
I hadn't seen that.
You mentioned Jay Jarvis Landry had 94 catches last year, over 1,100
good receivers.
Yards. They do. They do. They do have some firepower there, and you're right about Jay Ajayi. He came in well. Pouncey. Now, again, when I say about losing Larson, Pouncey is a guy they need to get back in there to run that line. He's had the hip injury, so we'll see where that goes. As Tunsil, their top pick last year, moves out to left tackle.
Who they stole. I mean, that's another. Remember, the Laramie, going back all the way to that, the Laramie Tunsil thing, which he was at one time projected to be the number one pick in the draft. Then he had the bong mask incident on draft night, and he winds up falling to wherever it was, 12 or 13.
Yep.
They wound up getting one of the top 2 or 3 players in the draft.
So he'll be out.
Now he moves in.
He'll be out at left tackle.
And Ndamukong Suh, who has played better than his stats would show. The defense was pretty good. They made the playoffs last year.
It's a team that everybody is waiting to take the next step, and quite honestly, waiting for Ryan Tannehill to take the next step as well. So we'll see. I mean, basically, Tannehill, a pocket guy who can move. Jay Cutler, a pocket guy. He had to move.
Yeah.
He had to run around, and he knows the system. So to me, this was not any kind of a controversial move at all of, just another team that doesn't want to sign Colin Kaepernick. To me, this one made much more sense to sign Jay Cutler.
It could certainly be seen that way. I understand that, and I actually agree. The other thing I'd say on this is the fascinating part, because Cutler to me has been a very interesting player throughout his tenure in the NFL. He gets one more shot. One last chance to fulfill the promise. Here is a guy who has all the talent in the world still. There are some guys who, when they're 60, you can wake them up from a dead sleep, and he could still throw a ball through a brick wall. Vinny Testaverde is one of those guys. This is one of those guys. Cutler is one of those guys. He gets one last chance with maybe the one guy left in the league that believes in him, in Adam Gase. So I, for one, am fascinated to see how the thing turns out. We've got a lot to get to this morning. We're Mike and Mike. We're just getting started. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. We get the perspective of many this morning, including Bomani Jones today, and Dan Le Batard from down there in Miami, and Herman today, and more. All our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. And let me just say, before we go any further, that shirt is fabulous on you. What is that? Is that new?
I think so.
I think it's new. It's a new shirt, and it's fantastic. You got a little makeup smudge on your shirt, right there, but it's a terrific shirt on you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Didn't know we were going there.
Well, I'm just sitting here. As we're chatting, I have to admit, there was a part of me that was getting a little lost in the shirt. You're talking, and I'm trying to listen to what you're saying, and I'm thinking, well, that's a terrific-looking shirt.
This old thing?
You just threw that on for my birthday celebration.
That's exactly right.
The best of Mike and Mike.
There we are. We're back in better than ever. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line, and they will include on this morning Bomani Jones and Dan Le Batard. Herman Edwards and the actor and the hilarious Keegan-Michael Key will be by our studio as well. So great fun to be had, again, with the guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. And, Dan Le Batard can give us some insight into this, the signing of Jay Cutler and what that means. There were 2 different ways to look at it. Again, we spent most of the first hour on this, and we're going to move to other stuff here. But there are almost every quarterback signing that will take place in the NFL this preseason will be viewed as a team turning its back on Kaepernick.
Right.
This, to me, might have been one of the, if not the only, unique circumstances where it really was not that, where the nature of the relationship between Gase and Cutler dictated that Cutler was, they believed, actually a better option than Kaepernick, even if in the big picture he isn't a better player.
Listen, I completely agree. He is 34 years old. I get that. Matt Moore, the backup now, who will be the starter until Jay Cutler gets caught up to speed, which shouldn't be too long, is 32. Cap, is a guy in his 20s. So I get the upside of that. But this is basically a year. A year to fill in for Ryan Tannehill as the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, and they hope into the future for the Miami Dolphins. So you get a guy that's familiar. I'll continue to say it. When you're learning a system, it's like learning a different language. And Jay Cutler doesn't have to do that because he knows the system and he knows the language Adam Gase uses. So it absolutely was the first name that I thought of. That Jay. I said, if Jay wants to come out of retirement, all he's missed right now is an off season. So he hasn't missed a year of football. Now, I don't know what he's been doing. If you're retiring, that probably means you're not training for the sport. But let's also be honest, training for the quarterback position as opposed to an offensive lineman or a linebacker or a cornerback might be a little different. He needs to throw and he needs to get in football shape, no doubt about it. And that's something he'll have time to do because it's at the beginning of the preseason.
When last seen, his wife was taking a picture of his naked butt on some island vacation.
I was trying to forget about that.
And putting that out there.
Yeah.
That was when I remember saying the next day, he's retired.
You did.
There's nowhere in the world that guy's coming back to play. And he's allowing his wife to put that out there. And now here he is $10 million will make a man do things. All right, brought to you by Mike and Mike, brought to you by Upside. Now save big on travel. Get a big gift card with every trip you buy. You will love Upside.com. That's Upside.com.
And real quick, let me say about that. There is that side of it. How much did he have to be talked into playing? Okay? Because now, so if the money was right, Colin Kaepernick, we all believe, wants to play.
Right.
Everybody's saying we need to hear from him, He's choosing not to do an interview. Certainly, that's his right to do or to not do. There is that side of it. Jay Cutler didn't want to play football anymore, or at least was going into the booth, and maybe he didn't get the love he wanted somewhere. I have no idea. And I don't know, which report you want to believe. He was, even in talking to Miami, he was leaning towards staying in the booth, but maybe the money got good enough for you to say, okay, I'm going to do it. What's the last situation we had in that one where someone got basically money whipped to do their job? Phil Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
And how well did that turn out?
Terribly.
So there is a thought process of, did he have to get talked into this? And did the money say, okay, now I want to play? So
would that concern you?
For forgetting I don't care about the look on the sideline. Jay Cutler is what he is. He's not going to be some rah-rah leader. I'm not talking about that. But the desire to play, to want to go in there and do the grind. Now, a lot of the grind is in the offseason. You're getting ready for the regular season now. Is okay, I'm going to get there. 2 weeks into it, is it going to be like, well, now I know why I wanted to be out of this game. I didn't want to do it anymore. I don't know. That only Jay Cutler can answer that. But if you have to, I don't know, and I don't know how much he had to be talked into doing this. So if you really had to be talked into it, yeah, there's a little bit in the back of my mind saying, how much of the want to is there?
The comparison I would make to it, and I saw Peter King wrote an interesting one, because on August 6th of 2008, Mike Tannenbaum, who was the general manager then of the Jets, called Bus Cook, who was the agent of a quarterback who everyone thought was sort of done, and figured out a way to get Brett Favre to the Jets. August 6th, 2017, so 9 years later to the day, Mike Tannenbaum, now the GM of the Dolphins, called Bus Cook, the agent for a quarterback everyone thought was done, and talked Jay Cutler into coming to Miami. So there's some interesting symmetry and a coincidence on the dates there. But our Jeff Darlington, again, NFL reporter, suggests this was not as much about money as it was about Jay wanting to go back and play in a place where they genuinely wanted him.
The money wasn't the ultimate deciding factor here. From Cutler's standpoint, it was all of a sudden this respect factor that everybody in the organization was now stepping up. From ownership to the front office, they were all saying, we want you here. To the point where, just as we were talking about, $10 million with the chance to earn up to $3 million in incentives on the end of that. So, money is nice, and so is respect. And all of a sudden, Jay Cutler says, I can deal with that.
And I'm sure on the other side of that, people are going to say, well, why didn't he get that in the offseason? Why didn't maybe they go after him in the offseason? Well, they had a quarterback in Ryan Tannehill, who was the quarterback now and for the future of this team. So there was really no need to sign Jay Cutler to come in that situation. But now the situation that presents itself, and, okay, if he feels like he was wanted. But, again, I wasn't there. I don't know what money they started at. I don't know if he used that as leverage to get more. So, and I'm not in Jay Cutler's head of the want to be there. There's I'm going to agree to play football. So there's a natural assumption, well, he wants to play football. Well, I don't know that for a fact. That's just something to me that would be in the back of my mind a little bit of how much did he have to be talked into coming back.
All right, we'll wait and see how that thing turns out. And again, we'll get perspective from both Bomani and Dan Le Batard and Herm Edwards. As the morning continues, we are Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance, and they will be on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. Meanwhile, let's get to the next piece of business here. Tom Brady last week, while we were away, there was finally an opportunity to ask him about his wife, Gisele Bündchen, saying that Tom had a concussion during the year last year, which for a variety of reasons that we don't need to go into here, any sports fan knows, is newsworthy in that he was never on the injury report with it. And there's that side of the story. And then there's the whole, we're talking a lot about football and concussions and CTE and brain injuries and all of that lately. And he's the biggest star in the sport. He just turned 40 years old. So Brady was finally asked about it, and he gave the following answer.
I don't want to get into, things that happened in my past, certainly medical history and so forth. I really don't think that's anybody's business. So, what happened last year, and I'm focused on this year and improving and working on things I need to get better at. So that's how I approach everything. I mean, I'm not sitting here worried about last year or 5 years ago. There's other people that do worry about that, my wife or my parents or my sisters or, people that love me and care about me. But, I do the best I can do to come out and be prepared to play, and mentally and physically, and, I give the game everything I can.
Okay, so the headline there, the headline is it's nobody's business. Mm-hmm. And then he went on and explained a lot of other things that are reasonable. Before I get your take on it, Mike, let's hear from Bob Lee, who yesterday, I believe this was on yesterday morning's E60, had a very strong response. Here's Bob Lee.
Tom Brady isn't known as a scrambling quarterback, but Friday morning he was an open field marvel. Talking to reporters at Patriots camp, and by the way, a Brady press availability can be as frequent as a solar eclipse. Brady was asked flat out by our colleague Mike Reese whether Gisele Bündchen's statement that her husband had suffered concussions was indeed accurate. Tom Brady's response, it's none of your business. The hell it isn't, Tom. With enhanced NFL protocols now in place to diagnose and treat brain trauma, that the league's greatest ever quarterback may have had concussions despite never being listed as such on an injury report, that is news. So was Roger Goodell's response to that recent CTE case series. He cited a 4-year-old study on a longer lifespan for players, even as his chief medical officer was saying, quote, it's very clear repetitive head injuries bring long-term health risks. Tom Brady just turned 40. He says this is all none of our business. And, Tom, I sincerely and honestly hope you can say that as you celebrate many healthy birthdays in the years ahead.
So there's Bob Lee, who I'm not going to take a poll on this. He's probably the most respected person, in, if not in all of sports journalism, right near the top. And there he is using a phrase. I've been at ESPN 21 years. I've never heard him say something quite as directly as he said that, and he has said a lot of things. So that's a pretty strong comment. Mike, what was your reaction?
Zero issue of what Brady said. Zero. And he doesn't owe Bob Lee or anybody else an explanation of the history of his injuries. Especially, was it they're public. They're unless you're accusing the New England Patriots of not putting an injury on an injury list, which is public, make that accusation then, if you want to do that. But was Tom Brady listed on a concussion report last year?
No, he was not.
No, he was
That's
not.
the point.
That's exactly. What's the point?
The point is that if he had a concussion and they didn't list it.
Well, then I said, have your issue with the Patriots. Does anybody have an issue with the Patriots? Are we ripping the Patriots at this point?
The question, no one is answering the question, did he have a concussion or not, except his wife, who says he did.
Right.
So the question is, did you have a concussion or not? Your wife says you did. If you did, it wasn't on the injury report. Now we have a problem.
No. The problem would be if he didn't say anything. And she's just diagnosing at home if he says he has a headache.
Meaning if he didn't say anything to the
team. And you know what? That's his right. Do you think the players aren't as educated as certainly my era or this era of player is as educated, and we still have a long way to go, but is as educated as any on what's going on? Do we believe that or not?
They certainly should be,
okay.
Yes.
And if a player wants to still hide a concussion, it's his right. That's his right. Are you saying that's not his right? Does he owe it to Bob Lee or to anybody else to say he had a concussion? If he chooses to do that, that's his body and his right to do. So now, I don't know if you're getting into, again, are we accusing the Patriots of hiding this? Are we accusing Tom Brady of getting stung in the head and not saying anything to the Patriots? Where are we going here? I mean, you tell me. I don't know.
Well, I think it's not an unfair question to say, did you have a concussion last year or not? He can say no.
Well, he can
if
say,
the truth is no, he can say no.
But he didn't. He can say whatever he wants, and he said, "I'm not talking." First of all, and foremost, that's a New England Patriot answer.
Right.
So we're going to be shocked. All of a sudden, we're going to think that's going to change. That they're going to be this open, team, or Tom Brady's going to give some sort of open interview when they don't do that. So number one, that's not going to happen. Number two is he doesn't have to talk about it. He has every right in the world to. Right when Brian Urlacher retired, he said, I'd still hide one. And you know what? That may not be the smartest thing in the world to do, but it's his choice, right? It's Tom Brady's choice to say, I'm not going to talk about my injuries in the past. They have nothing to do with what's going on right now. I have people that worry about that. My wife, my family, my siblings, they worry about that. That's fine. I don't. I move on to the next year. It's not his responsibility to talk about it or to say, yeah, I had a – well, because what happens if he says, yes, I had a concussion last year? Then what happens? Are you kidding me? Then the Patriots already seem to be a bullseye for the league. Now, why wasn't it reported? When did you have it? What did you have it? Did you say anything? If you said anything, why wasn't it reported? Come on. Everything that happens from that point on?
Yeah, no, that's why this was a big deal to begin with. When Giselle said he had a concussion.
Yeah, I understand.
That's why it became a big deal.
I understand that.
One of three things had happened at that point. Either A, she's wrong, he didn't have a concussion. There's no obvious reason to think she would have that wrong, but that's at least a possibility. B, he had a concussion and he didn't tell anybody about it. His wife knew about it, but the team didn't know about it. Or C, the team knew about it and he was never listed as having a concussion. It strikes me as those are the three realistic options. There isn't a good one for him in answering the question, but it doesn't mean it's not a legitimate question.
I didn't say it wasn't a legitimate question.
Right.
Everybody's having a problem with his answer. I don't have a problem with his answer at all. The question is fine. The question is a fair question to ask. But because Tom Brady doesn't break it down and open about it, we're owed that? We're not owed that.
So that's you've gotten to the crux of the interesting part of this, which is with the very particular place we are right now in history, with where football and concussions meet and what it's going to mean for the league going forward and what it means. If there is a story where the biggest star in the sport's wife said he had a concussion last year, I will never, ever tell a person he doesn't have a right or she doesn't have a right to keep their own medical history private if they choose to, right? Lots and lots of people do it. And that's his own business. Except when you're a football player, there are rules that stipulate that this stuff has to be made public if you have a variety of certain injuries. So it is worth knowing. I mean, I think that
what rule are you talking about? There's no rule
to disclose injuries.
No, I know that. There's no rule that Tom Brady said he has to. If in fact this happened, there's no rule that he has to go to the training staff and say, I got stung in the head.
Bingo. Is there at this point an unwritten rule that says, in the bigger picture, you really need to be doing that? If the biggest star in the sport is hiding the fact that he has a concussion, what message is that sending to everyone?
What have I said about this? What have I said about this all along? The players are the last one that are going to admit it. The players are the last ones. Some will. Some have retired. You have the right to do it however you want. You have the right to walk away from the game. We're at the professional level now there, so let's not start mixing college down to high school down to Little League. Okay, we're at the professional level where guys have said, you know what? I'm scared of this. I'm walking away. And you'll have a guy probably maybe right next to him on that team who will get stung in the head and not say a word. Or he won't get stung and it won't be as bad an issue as some people make it out to be. I mean, it's such a tough situation now because there are obviously legitimate concussions. And by the way, before everybody starts, I understand repeated shots to the head are going to cause things down the road as we're still finding out. I understand all that. I'm talking about players, and I'm talking about now going to the younger levels. When people have said, well, how is a 9 or 10-year-old going to know? I said they're not. That's why coaches and parents are getting more and more educated on understanding that. Now we're at the pro level. Guys are making decisions. Tom Brady can make whatever decision that he wants. Okay? And if he wants to hide an injury, he can hide an injury. Is it all of a sudden his responsibility to say, I have a concussion? I have a concussion.
I guess I would ask you that based upon his particular standing in the sport, just how significant he is. He's the greatest quarterback that ever lived and the biggest star in the sport. We're trying to tell high school kids, if you have a concussion, say something to your coach. Tell someone. Don't just try and hide it. That's not the right thing to do. So is there an obligation? I understand what you're saying.
Right.
And my initial reaction actually in this was what yours is, which is, he really doesn't have to tell anybody if he had a concussion if he kept it secret. Now, if he did tell the coaching staff and they try to...
That's a whole different thing.
At this point, I think he's smart enough to know not to do that.
Yeah.
Right? There are some things, there's the lies of omission.
And let's also think he may not have had a concussion.
Well, so that
let's also think that he may have
said, and just say, well, my wife, she was confused. But now you're getting into a level of detail that you probably don't feel like getting involved in.
And name me the last New England Patriot that got into detail in an interview.
Right. So I just think, look, this was obviously something they knew was going to be asked.
Right.
This was the answer they prepared. The answer they prepared was, it's no one's business whether I did or I didn't. And I guess I would just ask you, based on the unique circumstances that we are dealing with as much attention, focus, and significance as there is on head injuries in and around football, does the biggest star in the sport have some obligation to be as open as he can be about it, to send that message to young people who look up to him?
No, he doesn't have the responsibility. In my eyes, he doesn't. His responsibility is to his team, and if he wants to do what he wants to do to be out in the field and play, that's what he's allowed to do. And I get what people are going to say, well, wait a minute, what message did that send? Because we want younger players, especially, when you get into high school, to not try and play through it. That's why we have, you want coaches to recognize it as well. Would you like everybody to make a smart decision at times? Certainly you would, but I'm just telling you it's not going to happen. So to sit there and rip a guy because it's not happening, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. When you get in there and you're working and you're playing and you want to be on the field, you're just not going to talk about certain things. You're not going to admit to certain things. That's how it's been. And while I think that is changing and some players are, as I said, they're walking away from the game now. They're walking, and it's their choice to do. And if a guy wants to get hurt, a shoulder, but I know we're talking about a head here, and doesn't want to say anything, then that's his right. That's his right to do. Is it not?
That, I guess, is what I'm asking you.
Yes.
Have we reached a point now where there is some obligation on behalf, particularly of veteran players who've made all the money in the world, for whom the sport has done so much, to do something that is in the greater good? If indeed we think that Tom Brady making some sort of statement whose message would be, listen, if you have a concussion, tell someone about it. Don't hide it. Don't make that mistake. That's what football used to be, and that's not the right way to do this. Would the greater good be served by that? And if so, does a player of his caliber have some obligation to do it?
To your point, the greater good would probably, because we're always talking about what stature of player says something and what kind of weight does it carry. So from that side of it, I get it. Yes, I understand that. But that doesn't mean he's obligated to do it.
If the greatest player in the league and the biggest star says, it's nobody's business what happened with me.
Right.
Is that sending the reverse message? Is that in some way sending the opposite message, which is to young players who are smart enough to understand all the things you said, and anyone who really follows the sport does, which is, hey, Tom Brady says if you have a concussion, don't do anything about it. Keep it secret so you don't go back on the field and you don't incriminate yourself and your coaching staff and all the rest of that. And again, I'm not criticizing Brady. I understand what he's saying.
Well, no, and I understand.
I get the criticism on the other side,
I understand the bigger picture. And let's also say we're assuming that he had a concussion. Let's also be careful of that.
Because if he didn't, then it's much easier to say I didn't, right? It's very easy to say, no, I didn't have a concussion.
But all the talk is we're assuming that he had a concussion and he just hit it. But players will do that. Players will hide that. To your point about the message, yeah, you would like the message to be different. My point is that's a slow change. And to say one person is more obligated because he's a bigger star than someone else, I don't buy. Sorry. You know what? It's his choice on how he wants to deal with it. But I do understand what you're saying, what kind of weight that would carry to say, hey, if you have an injury, report it. I get all that. And it sounds great and it makes sense. But when you're out in the football field, unfortunately, there are things that are going to happen that you're just going to play through, and that includes still getting hit in the head.
I understand that. And is that or is that not a problem? Like, if we don't change that, does nothing ever get better? Let's pause on that thought, and we'll come back. We'll continue to talk about it because
things have already gotten better.
Well, Greeny, we're halfway through another baseball season, and we're really seeing some players who stand out as winners.
Kind of like business travelers who win at business by staying at La Quinta Inns and Suites.
That's because you can put your La Quinta Returns loyalty points to work on the spot with instant free nights.
Just drive up with no reservation and instantly redeem points for a free night that same night simply by using the La Quinta app.
It's like hitting a grand slam.
With an app instead of a bat.
Well played.
Prepare to win at business by learning more about instant free nights and check out the summer rates at lq.com.
Guys don't really talk about antiperspirant. Despite that, 91% of Dove Men Plus Care users recommend it. Here's what they said.
It blocks the, perspiration, I think is the fancy word.
It's comfortable. It smells nice. My girl likes the smell.
Well, it's hard.
I think it's quite masculine. My underarms aren't the worst thing at the gym.
It's kind of like the Hoover Dam from my armpits, I guess.
Dove Men Plus Care Antiperspirant. Tough on sweat, not on skin.
complicated issue here, and I want to bring Bomani in on it here. Mike, you and I can go back to some of the questions that you have about it, because I think it's an important topic, but I'd like to get Bo's thoughts on this as well. You know Bomani Jones from The Right Time with Bomani Jones, coast to coast every afternoon here on ESPN Radio. Good morning, Bo.
Morning, gentlemen.
This is a complicated one. Tom Brady last week says, it's nobody's business if I had a concussion last week or not. My medical history is my business. It's nobody else's business. Bob Lee says very directly on ESPN yesterday, the hell it's not. That's a direct quote. Mike and I have been going back and forth on it here for the last 10 minutes or so. It seems to me it raises a lot of interesting questions. What thoughts do you have?
I think the dilemma in this is, on one level, he's right. It is not our business whether or not he had a concussion, because that does fall in the line of medical stuff, and medical stuff is not our business. It is, however, our business whether or not the Patriots and Brady concealed the fact that he had a concussion. Right now, it's a subtle distinction, I certainly understand, but no, we don't get to ask him, so what was going on with you medically? But we do get to ask, hey, man, did you guys lie about whether or not you had a concussion in the course of this game? I don't know where it is that you ultimately settle it, but I feel like where Brady comes to us and says it's none of our business, we didn't really ask. Somebody told us, and so what are we supposed to do from there?
Yeah, listen, they're perfectly right to ask the question. I mean, his wife did say that on TV, so I don't think it's wrong to ask the question at all, and I have no problem with his answer at all. A, it's kind of a New England Patriot answer, and B, at this point, Bomani, what answer can he give that's not going to put more scrutiny on him or the team? Yes, I had a concussion and I told them about it and they covered it up. Yeah, that'll go over well. Or yes, I had a concussion and I hid it from them, and then more scrutiny will go on him. So I think one of his ways, but I do think he's serious in saying, you know what, it's in the past. I have people in my life that worry about my health. I worry about this year coming up and what's happening in the future.
Yeah, I don't know what we're supposed to do with it at this point. Like, to be fair, I don't quite know, and I'm not sure if we pursue this the same way if it's anybody other than Tom Brady. The same way that if Tom Brady's wife is not as famous as his wife is, we don't find out about this in the first place. But Brady's basically saying, if you want to find out about this, go ahead and find out, except you can't find out because it's my medical stuff. So, I mean, it does wind up us going in a circle.
The one place that I think is interesting is at the particular point in history where we sit right now, Bomani, with how important the head injury issue is in football and how important it is that the proper messages get sent to young people in the sport, and no one is more at the forefront of that, Mike, right now than you and your family are, but the messaging that goes to the young players. Does a star of Brady's magnitude have some obligation to be more forthcoming than he seems to be on this issue, if only because it would send a message that, you know what, head injuries are not something that we conceal. Head injuries are something, if you have it, tell your coach, tell your doctor, do something, do the right thing. Don't try and hide it like you might hide a sprained ankle. Does he have any obligation along those lines?
I think there's an argument to be made about that because of his visibility and the impact that he could ultimately have, that yes, he should be the one to do this. I think the people that are going to be at the forefront of that, though, are really going to be younger guys who have been indoctrinated in this in a different way. Tom Brady's 40 years old. The attitude that he came up with about how you're supposed to handle these things is completely different than it'll be for, say, a guy like Andrew Luck, who's become an NFL player after we've kind of had an enlightenment about this. But at the same time, Tom Brady's argument to you would be, my obligation is to help my football team win. That is number one, and that is really what the expectation is that most people have, which is why the responsibility is on the team to make sure that this does not happen more so than the player, because we know that players cannot be trusted on this. Like, take Alex Smith, for example. Given that Alex Smith lost his job in San Francisco because of a concussion, if I had to guess, Alex Smith is going to try to hold it in the road as best he can under those circumstances, because he knows what can happen when he winds up going to the bench. That's why teams have to be the ones that stand up and say, no, we got to sit you down.
Yeah, and they've been doing that more and more. We'll get into more of that, and it's a good point about Tom Brady and the fact that the big deal made that he is 40 years old, has been in this game a long time, and may still have some of that old school mentality to him. Jay Cutler signing in Miami. Did it surprise you at all? Everybody talking about Colin Kaepernick, his name coming up again with an injured quarterback, but to us, to Green and I, Cutler seemed to be the fit with Adam Gase. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think Cutler coming off the torn labrum, there's a real question as to what he has left. And, I mean, I don't know what Jay Cutler has been doing in this offseason to get himself ready to play football other than broadcast preparation stuff. Last time I saw him, he was out there with his booty in the wind, taking pictures with his wife, talk about no tan lines. Like, I don't get the feeling that Jay Cutler's been throwing the ball through a tire swing, getting ready for somebody to make this call. But it was the call that the Miami Dolphins had to make. With Kaepernick, I said that I think there are 31 teams that he could sign with, and I think that fans would ultimately get over whatever beast they have. And then there are the Miami Dolphins. And with the T-shirt with Castro on it, I lived in Miami for 4 years. They ain't letting that one slide. That wasn't happening. So if those are the options that you have, then Jay Cutler is probably the best one, which leads to something fascinating because I don't think you pay Jay Cutler $10 million if you think that Ryan Tannehill is going to play this year. After this season, the Dolphins can get from under Ryan Tannehill's contract pretty easily. It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out for the future of the Dolphins.
Again, to the point, you were there in Miami for all of those years. Stephen Jones is one who was supportive of the players on his team who followed Kaepernick in his movement and knelt during the anthem. So what you're saying is you think this is not
Stephen
about...
Stephen Ross.
What did I say?
Stephen Jones.
Oh,
Stephen
sorry.
Ross.
Yeah, Stephen Jones. Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, was one who supported his players in that. So you're saying you think this is more about Castro than it is about kneeling during the anthem.
Yeah, absolutely. Ask Ozzie Guillen about that. Right? Like, this does not work in that town. There is nothing that he could say that would work in that town to explain this one. Keep in mind, that T-shirt I think he wore in August when they came and played the Dolphins. Armando Salguero, the Herald, was ready for him. Like, I've been waiting months to get these questions in. And there's a large segment of the city that feels that way. And I guarantee that that's a level of stress that Stephen Ross doesn't want to deal with. And that's a circumstance that is entirely unique to all NFL cities.
What do you think happened in Baltimore with Kaepernick?
I think what happened in Baltimore was that the decision was made by Bisciotti that he just didn't want to be the one to deal with that. I don't know. I can't say exactly what's going on there, but I wonder for all these NFL teams, what are the emails and phone calls they're getting, not from fans, but like the police union and the guys that make the threats after something where they say we're not going to work, we're not going to do our off-duty security stuff that we had done for you guys before. Like all of those things. I also think that Baltimore winds up in a different situation where if you bring Kaepernick in to play behind Joe Flacco, I don't know if you do that with the expectation he plays behind Joe Flacco all season long. It would have been far more likely that he would have wound up being on the field in Baltimore, and I don't know how prepared they were for what would come after that. But I think the rich guys have made the decision that they don't want to offend their rich friends. I don't think this has that much to do with fans exactly. They don't want to offend their rich friends, and that matters more than winning football games.
So does that ultimately mean that we will start this season and Colin Kaepernick will not be on an NFL team?
I would be surprised if Colin Kaepernick plays another game in the NFL.
Yeah,
I've
sort of gotten to that point as well. If it didn't happen in the circumstances that we've seen come up here, I'm not sure what circumstances it will. All right, Bomani Jones will hear you today and every day, coast to coast on ESPN Radio. Thank you. See you soon.
No problem, guys.
That's Bomani Jones. That was very direct on the Castro T-shirt part of it. I knew that was a factor in it, and yet that was as direct as could be. And again, for those of you who follow him, he worked on Dan Le Batard's show down there in Miami, lived in Miami for 4 years. Dan himself will join us off the top of the next hour, and we'll have a very direct understanding of that. We'll get back to your thoughts on the Brady obligation.
Because there's more. There's a lot of – when I said the league it is dealing with it better now. I'm getting a lot of people kind of saying, I'm laughing at that. How has it gotten better? It's gotten better.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Here we are. We're back in Better Than Ever, and really interesting stuff this morning as we are headlong into football 2017. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance, and Dan Le Batard will join us from Miami in just a couple minutes here on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. During the television segments here that we were running, we saw some of Jerry Jones' speech from the Hall of Fame the other night, and I saw that. Did you see Phil Knight made him a custom pair of Nikes? Yeah. Only the third person ever to receive a custom pair of Nikes, Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods being the other two. It just goes to show you the remarkable Jerry Jones. People tend to judge him based upon their feelings of how he has generally managed the Dallas Cowboys. The reality is, from a business standpoint, that's the reason Jerry Jones is in the Hall of Fame. Jerry Jones not in the Hall of Fame because his team's won 3 Super Bowls. Jerry Jones in the Hall of Fame because his business savvy has been as significant in the league as anybody's. And there's Phil Knight saying,
"Oh yeah,
I'm putting you on a level as far as how significant you've been to Nike with Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods."
He told some great stories. I didn't realize he tried to buy a team at 23 years old.
Yeah,
23, and his dad jumped on him and he said, "Dad, you don't have to sign a note or anything like that. You're not responsible." And he said, "I'm your father." He said, "If something goes wrong, who they coming to?" He goes, "I'm always going to be responsible." And then the stories about with him and Jimmy Johnson, talking about when they parted ways, when he came home and just wanted to lay down, and his wife said to him, "Just had to stick your face into it. Just have to keep sticking your nose into it and making these decisions." Kind of jumping on him, and it was good. There were some really, really good stories.
The dynamic between the two of them, which is legendary, of course, was very interesting to watch on display during that, and very warm. At some point, these things become bygones.
And I'm glad it did, because it's a shame that relationship couldn't continue, because I'll tell you what, Jimmy Johnson, as a talent evaluator, is one of the best I've seen. One of the best I've seen. When he worked with us one year before the draft, when I was working the draft more, and he got up and went on the whiteboard and how he breaks everything down and decides things, it was like a PhD in learning how to pick players, and God knows he did it so well. It was very, very cool to see.
That won a championship on the college level and the pro level. We'll see. If you look, by the way, I was glancing through, maybe we can set aside tomorrow and do some of this. The backlog, the log jam of people who were not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame who should be, and then you will add 3 names next year that I think are Hall of Fame locks in Ray Lewis, Randy Moss, and Brian Urlacher. Not to say they're all going to get in the first year, because it's so hard to do that. I have to believe of those 3, Ray Lewis is a lock. Right?
Yes.
Is he a mortal lock?
I think absolutely. I think Randy Moss is close to that. I think Urlacher's close to that. But
I do too. But Moss, not the receivers. I mean, I can't believe Terrell Owens isn't in.
Well,
I just can't believe it.
The top of the list of those that have already been eligible and not in is T.O., right? And here comes another wide receiver in Randy Moss.
Those are the two preeminent receivers of their generation. Those two guys.
You tell me who you want. I would take Randy Moss.
You might, but you're never. But T.O.'s been waiting, and Moss hasn't.
I'm with you.
And you're not putting them both in. It just doesn't work that way. There's no way they're both going in the same year.
I agree. And I think push comes to shove. I think T.O.'s going to be waiting another year, and Randy gets in. You think? Right off just initial thought?
I don't know.
Because I know Randy's had some issues too. I get it. But, man, they're really holding some things against T.O.
Okay, so and then there's Urlacher, who I think has the bad timing of being a player who was a historically great player at the same position as another guy,
and Ray Lewis,
who was historically greater.
Yep.
I mean, Ray Lewis is Brian Urlacher is a no doubt slam dunk Hall of Famer,
one of the great athletes to play that position.
But Ray Lewis is the same position and greater, even a slammer dunk or whatever. I don't even know how you would quantify that.
Dunk?
He's more of a slam dunk. I mean, Ray Lewis has got to get in his first year, so I think that means that Urlacher probably won't. All right, we got a lot working here. Let's get Dan Le Batard into the conversation. You hear him every day, coast to coast, following us with Stu Gatz, and he is now on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold. Good morning, Dan Le Batard.
I love that. A slammer dunk. More than a slam dunk is a slammer dunk, and as it applies to Ray Lewis, it was very nearly the slammer dunk.
Oh, well done.
That's well played.
Well played.
Took you a second.
That's well played. All right, we have 2 big topics on the table today, and the primary one we wanted from you, especially because of your proximity to the situation, is with the Dolphins, and they're signing Jay Cutler, and they're not signing Colin Kaepernick. Both Mike and I immediately went to Cutler's relationship with Adam Gase. Then we had your friend Bomani Jones on a little bit earlier, and he said that Miami is the one market that forget about, and I've found Stephen Ross has been fairly progressive in a lot of his comments regarding the Kaepernick's stance. But Bomani brought up the issue of the Fidel Castro T-shirt and how that is the one market that would never possibly be accepted. What is your perspective on all of this from a Kaepernick standpoint?
Yeah, there's that, and there's the relationship with Adam Gase, Cutler having his best season with Adam Gase getting this job essentially because he was the quarterback whisperer who allowed Cutler to make fewer turnovers, which is the fatal flaw with Jay Cutler. You go all around the league, Bob McAdoo, you got a bunch of people all over the league where they get their jobs because they're the guys who can make quarterbacks a little bit better. And so you understand where it is that Jay Cutler and this relationship would make it so that all other things being equal, Jay Cutler and Colin Kaepernick feel kind of equal. We can argue about it, we can split hairs, but they feel kind of equal. And so all things being equal, if you've got a guy who's got a relationship with the coach and doesn't have a controversy that involves Fidel Castro, that guy's going to get your job.
I got that, but let me rephrase the question. If Jay Cutler wasn't in the picture, or if Jay Cutler had said no, or if Gase didn't have this relationship with Cutler, do you believe the Dolphins would have seriously considered Kaepernick?
I do, because of the things that Stephen Ross has said, because he's been very vocal. He's been one of the few owners who's been vocal about it, saying that, Kaepernick should be in our league. So, but I did find weird that Armando Salguero reports that they also considered Tebow and Kyle Orton. I mean, what's the next step on this, right? How many quarterbacks have to get hurt? We can make a plausible explanation for Miami, but are we going to always be able to make the plausible explanation? Like, are we going to be able to do this when Kaepernick gets passed over for someone like Kyle Orton? Because I don't know. I think your situation, Greeny, the Jets is the most egregious one, where you've got the owner, being ambassador to whatever, Great Britain, and a Trump supporter, and, just not anti-Kaepernick in just about every way. And then your quarterback situation is very obviously worse than what Colin Kaepernick would be there, when you've got a brittle Josh McCown, who maybe in his prime wasn't even as good as Colin Kaepernick. That's the one situation I point to. I'm like, man, that's not right. That right there is the Jets not wanting politics in their huddle.
Oh, absolutely. Let me make very clear. I mean, they're my Jets only to the extent that I root for them. But I remember having this conversation with people at the Super Bowl, that there is no conceivable chance the Jets will sign Colin Kaepernick for exactly the reason that you just said. I don't think they're the only team in that boat. I would guess there's something in the neighborhood of 20 teams in the NFL that just flat will not touch him. And from the very beginning, I said the Jets would not.
Yeah, you said that right off the bat. Dan, does Colin Kaepernick have a job this year or no?
Well, it depends on how many people get hurt in that sport, Mike. Like, I got to think eventually it'll become so egregious and obvious that you can't deny it anymore. Like, there's still people out there arguing that Colin Kaepernick isn't being shunned because he took a knee. That argument is still being made. I got to think that this is the one sport. It'd be pretty funny if the Dolphins, if Jay Cutler got hurt, which would be the most normal thing in the world behind an offensive line that has been leaky. If Jay Cutler got hurt, then are the Dolphins going to pass on Kaepernick again if Jay Cutler gets hurt? Like, how many of these do we have to go through before Kaepernick has a job? The whole thing is a little bit weird that we're already here in the middle of August with a quarterback all of us would acknowledge is one of the best 100 quarterbacks in the world.
Yeah, I think we're past that point. Honestly, Dan, I think there isn't any question that the majority of teams in the NFL are just not going to sign him, and he's going to have to find that one team that is willing to do it and needs a quarterback. Do you not agree with that?
If I may, though, Mike. No, if I may, though, you saw what happened with the Dolphins, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is actually a funny situation where you might not want to bring on Colin Kaepernick as your backup because the backup sits and might bring a bunch of whatever they call distractions and stuff. But the funny part about this is you might bring him in as your starter. If your situation is so desperate that you've got to be like the Miami Dolphins trying to coax Jay Cutler out of retirement because you're trying to save your season because you don't want to go, 2-14 because you're close. You feel like you're close and then the quarterback gets hurt. Like, to me, the funny thing is that Colin Kaepernick is more likely to be a starter than he is to be a backup. That part is weird because that's kind of where we are. Once the need and the desperation get such, that comes first. The need and the desperation, when people have to start saving their jobs, when the customer base doesn't want to go 2-14, it's an odd situation to say, but I do think most people would agree with the idea that Kaepernick will be a starter in this league before he'll be a backup.
Dan, from the fans' side of this, do you think it's all being overblown? I was reading about Michael Vick. When Michael Vick got out of prison and went to Philadelphia, the first day he went to work, there were 30 protesters. The second day, there were like 15 or 20, and the third day, there were 5, and then that was it. And it was over. If Kaepernick gets a job, would you expect that type of situation as well for it to be over pretty quickly as far as protesters?
Man, that's hard to say. I don't know what it is that everybody is exactly fearing here because, Mike, since the beginning on this, I've been a little bit confused as to why it is that this has been such a polarizing issue. When if the starting point on kneeling is Colin Kaepernick's very reasonable request, hey, can we please stop killing black people unnecessarily and unjustly? Like, it's not... That by itself isn't that controversial. Like, the controversial part is the killing of black people. Protesting the killing of black people is not that controversial. And so the fact that we've arrived here where Colin Kaepernick has jumped from the sports pages into one of these transcendent symbols where he's no longer a football player. He is this issue. His name is associated with this issue, not being, a few yards from winning the Super Bowl. The fact that we've arrived here at all is confounding to me. Like, I just didn't think that in 2017 we'd still be in this place, presidential election notwithstanding, that we'd still be in this place where we're doing this with the color of skin, where the color of skin in 2017 is still something that is divisive. Like, it's just crazy to me that we've arrived here.
Well, I think we've all learned a lot about that through this process. But I just want one more quickly on the Castro element of this, because that part of it I found really interesting. In Miami, that is a unique circumstance, and Bomani brought up what happened with Ozzie Guillen, and I remember, Dan, you being on our show multiple times after the Ozzie Guillen controversy along those lines. So if Cutler were to get hurt, could the Dolphins bring him in that city, in a place where that part of it, forgetting about the kneeling during the anthem, but that particular part of it would be so controversial?
I think so, Mike. I think, first of all, I wanted Colin Kaepernick as the quarterback here. My parents did not want Colin Kaepernick as the quarterback here. And there is some generational differences because the dying generation is the one that has the most reason and the most pain inflicted by Castro. And so you have a lot of Cuban Americans like me who have grown up in this country, who've become Americanized, who've learned to think for ourselves because of the freedom that these exiles brought us. And so I don't agree with my parents on this. But what you're alienating would be an older Cuban, and the younger Cubans who defend the passions of the older Cubans emotionally instead of rationally, because I will side with my parents on their pain over all else, no matter what it is that I believe. But in this particular case, I like Colin Kaepernick's skill set for the Miami Dolphins. So I would have taken him ahead of Cutler personally, but there's a lot of arguing back and forth about who's better, Jay Cutler or Colin Kaepernick. But the Cuba issue is an interesting one, because I do think that the Miami sports fan would be myopic enough that if Jay Cutler goes down and they're looking at a season of Matt Moore, they might put their ethnicities and their politics aside to cheer for Colin Kaepernick.
All right, Mike and Dan Le Batard, who's with us. The other thing we've been talking about this morning, and now we're getting into a really complicated area as far as what is the obligation of a hugely successful public figure when he can, without wanting to become a difference maker on a significant topic. So you have Tom Brady last week saying, my personal health history is nobody's business. And you have Bob Lee saying, and I quote, the hell it isn't. And we've talked a lot about it here this morning. What obligation? Yes, I was taken aback by Bob saying it that strongly as well. Where, Dan, do you see, if anywhere, Brady having an obligation to be transparent and open on the issue of head injuries in a sport that has made him an iconic figure and all of that, knowing how important his words on the subject might be for young players?
Yeah, it's not in him, though. He's shown nowhere in his past, in that bejeweled resume, he has shown nowhere that he's willing to take a stand on anything. The Michael Jordan, Derek Jeter model it's a very lucrative model. The idea of, I'm just going to give you my excellence and nothing else, and that's all you're going to get, and it's going to have to speak for itself, because you're not going to get anything else out of me on any subject that's interesting. And so what's happened in those circumstances, you win that much, and we'll fill in the mythology around you, whether you're giving us the words to do it or not. So I understand what you're saying. Like, yes, John Amici's theory is that LeBron James, if he wished to, LeBron James could help with the world's education problem and could help with the world's famine problem if he dedicated himself and all his resources and all his power to actually attacking that cause. Of course, Tom Brady's wife said last year that he got a concussion, and that became a story for days. If Tom Brady were give a voice and a name and a face to this that's still living, that of course he can move the mountain on this, but he's not a mountain mover socially. He's a mountain mover on the field, nowhere else.
Do you feel players, there should be an obligation on their part?
Well, I don't want to push my sensibilities on these people. You are who you are. Like, I would like that, of course, but I'm in the content business. Like, I've got a bias, too. I want them to do that because I believe that all of us are sitting here playing games and that the real work is when, you know, sports is the funhouse mirror where society goes to check its reflection. Like, that's what I want sports to be, but I can't expect Tom Brady to be that for me just because I want it. That would make me awfully selfish. Like, I want it. I want Tom Brady to be out there and be comfortable, be polarizing. Hell, I'd be fine if Tom Brady went out there and decided to be like a professional wrestler and just woof and be like Ric Flair. I'd enjoy all of that. But I can't force that on him when that's not how he wants to be.
He can't do that. Rob Gronkowski is too busy doing that for him. He's Dan Le Batard every day following us here coast to coast with Stugotz and Company. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
That's Dan Le Batard with us. Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. He and all our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. That's an interesting part of the Kaepernick story. If you have followed, just to go back to that one quickly, the owner, Stephen Ross, whom I had the opportunity to hear speak a couple of weeks ago at the Humanitarian Awards, he's a guy who I think would have signed Kaepernick. I do. I believe he would have. The Castro issue that is so specifically important in Miami is one I really hadn't. I mean, maybe it's my own stupidity for having overlooked that side of it. But until Bomani brought it up as strongly as he did an hour ago, I really hadn't thought of that part of it. That might create more controversy in Miami than anything else.
But what's interesting is that Colin Kaepernick, what's being held against him is his views on things and things he said. But what did Dan just say? And that's why I went to Dan, because Dan's down in Miami. He said there would be people willing to put aside, if their team was in a position to need wins and they felt Colin Kaepernick could get them wins, people would put aside their views to then root for Colin Kaepernick to help them win their team. Yet that's exactly what's being held against him, is his views on things.
Well, so that brings up an interesting question because, look, I understand people who have a major issue with the manner in which Colin Kaepernick chose to make his protest. I understand it. I personally support his right to do it, but I understand that people do not. But I wonder if, and this would never happen, but I wonder if Aaron Rodgers did that. Would those same people say, I don't want him on my team? You know, if Colin Kaepernick, it's kind of hard to quantify how good he is right now.
Yeah.
You can make arguments that say, well, his numbers last year were pretty good, and then, well, it didn't really look that good all the time.
It gives you just enough of an out, where in Aaron Rodgers it wouldn't. Aaron Rodgers, a Hall of Fame quarterback, so you're going to put him on the team.
Plausible football deniability on Kaepernick, just to say he's not a
which still is kind of a chuckle at this point.
There's no question in my mind that he is being blackballed by the majority of teams in the NFL. I don't even think that's a discussion point. It's an obvious fact. I also do think there are teams in the league that would sign him, and maybe none of them need a quarterback right now. But putting all that aside, I'm now talking about the people. I'm talking about the fans. Be as open and honest as this as you can. We're just having a conversation here. If that player, if the person that you are so offended by and upset with were 100 times better. You know, I mean, I don't even know who you would put in this category right now. Was Cam Newton or was Aaron Rodgers or was someone who's just obviously a great player? Would your perspective change? Would you now want him on your team? I don't know the answer. I can't tell anyone.
Everybody's got to answer that themselves. But as I said, the better you are, the more leash you get. And I think that would be true in this case as well. Hey, everyone, Mike Golick here. Support for Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS consumeraccess.org number 3030.
Pleasure to welcome the one, the only Herman Edwards into our studio. It's been far too long since I've said
you guys
that.
been on vacation.
How are you? We were gone last week, but now we are back, and it is delightful to see you as always.
Good to see you guys. Always good to come on the show, obviously. And Captain America has spoken up.
Yes, he has, or not spoken up. One of the two, however you want to look at it. We'll look at it differently.
We got the Brady on the table today. We got Cutler, Kaepernick, all that. I do want to bounce one thing off both of you quickly in the last 15 minutes. Adam Schefter reported the Browns quarterback Brock Osweiler has been named the starter for their preseason opener against the Saints. Now, this is not a team from whom much is expected, but he is a guy with a big contract, and I think the general feeling is he's either going to be the starter or he's going to get cut.
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking to some people there and kind of following along, and they said at one point DeShone Kizer had been rising up and looking like he may grab the job. I know the last scrimmage they had, Cody Kessler didn't do himself any favors. Kizer played a little bit more like a rookie, and it was Brock Osweiler who kind of separated himself from the pack, and I think that's all they have to go on is who's looking good at the time and can go forward. And I thought Cody Kessler would be the starter at the beginning of the season. As I said, he didn't do himself a whole lot of good in the last scrimmage, and it seemed Brock Osweiler is kind of grabbing that job right now.
Here's the statement from their coach, Hugh Jackson. At this stage in the evaluation process of our quarterbacks, we're going to have Brock start the preseason opener against the Saints on Thursday. A lot goes into our evaluation, but it's always going to be about efficiently and effectively running the offense. You want your starter to be able to do that despite any circumstance. Brock hasn't really gotten any first-team reps, and this will give him that chance. We look forward to seeing what he can do with this opportunity throughout the week and against the Saints. Cody will be the second quarterback to take the field, followed by DeShone and then Kevin. I'm pleased with the way our quarterbacks have blah, blah, blah. So he's not getting first-team reps, Herman, and now he's going to start the preseason game.
And that's the problem when you have quarterback competition, when you have that many guys. They don't get the reps. You can't divide them up well enough for all the guys will, it's in today's football, especially because you're not practicing as long as you've done in the past.
Only have one pad practice.
All those things come into view. So I think he's right. He needs to let Osweiler start, see how he functions with the first group. They got a problem because if Cody Kessler was supposed to be the guy, he played last year, and he's struggling already. That's not a good sign.
So if you have, putting the coaching cap on, if you have legitimately three quarterbacks, you're looking for a starter. No, I certainly
you don't have one.
Certainly
you got
understand
three.
that.
You don't have one.
So how do you have to? Not so much practice because you only have the one pad of practice. In these preseason games, do you have to let each of them get time with the starters?
Absolutely. And here's the key, Mike. You want them actually to play against the other starters because that's who they're going to. You want them. I always tell those young guys, hey, this game you actually get to play against the varsity. Because generally they're playing against the JVs. Mm-hmm. You want to see them play against the guys that are going to actually play on Sunday. That's important. And so that's why the third preseason game was so critical in the fact that you knew you had some young guys. You wanted to get your starters in there to play a little bit. But it was the young guys that were going to have opportunities. I wanted to see how they were going to play against the varsity players. That's kind of important.
All right, so they're sorting their situation out in Cleveland. Herman is here with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. Jay Cutler is the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. He'll take a physical and then sign a contract today. Herman, your thoughts?
Well, that was an easy get for Coach. I mean, he's a guy that actually could go in right now and call a play. I mean, he could get you out of a bad play at the line of scrimmage. He knows the offense. Is he in shape? No, he's going to have 4 weeks to get in shape to play the quarterback position. I mean, a lot of people were saying, was Deshaun Kaepernick, this is an easy sign for them. This is my sign, actually, and you'll remember, you're a Jet fan. We had Jay Feedley, and we had Vinny Testaverde, and we had Chad Pennington, and Chad goes down against Jacksonville. And Jay comes in, and 2 plays later, he goes down.
Yeah.
And so at halftime, I'm walking in the locker room and going, oh, this is my 2 guys go down. We got Brooks Bollinger. And I'm sitting, I said, hey, call Vinny Testaverde. Vinny Testaverde's 42 years old. He's sitting at home watching it. And he's going, Coach, I said, can you help? I said, yeah, you can help us. Can you come back this week? He comes back. Brooks Bollinger plays against Baltimore, and then Vinny starts the next game, and we actually win with Vinny. But now we played 5 quarterbacks. That year we didn't win a lot of games, but this is the best scenario for the Miami
So
Dolphins.
explain why. I was trying, but do it from the coaches. Now Cutler comes in with Adam Gase. So I tried to. We've talked about this a lot over the years. Is when for a quarterback to learn a system, it's like learning a different language. He knows that language. So explain that of just how much easier it will be.
He can actually go in the offensive meeting room and sit there and understand exactly what coach is saying. He doesn't have to have any. We got to take him after practice and keep him here at night. He understands the system. He's going to catch it. He knows it right now. There might be a few nuances that he doesn't know, but he understands that. He could actually walk out today on the practice field and go in the huddle and call plays. He'd know what to do, right? I mean, he knows what to do. And, you talk about this is kind of funny. It says, well, you look at Jay Cutler, and what bothers you about Jay Cutler – his facial mannerisms, right? It just drive you crazy, right? But when you look at their records, he's 68-71. Colin Kaepernick is 28-30. Okay, Colin Kaepernick's 59% passer. This guy's 62. Jay Cutler's whatever you want. Okay, he's 11 years. I get it, but he knows the system. The players are going, oh, okay, we got Jay Cutler. They would be okay with Kaepernick, but Kaepernick. He would be learning the system. Now you got a guy that knows this. You got a guy coming in right now competing to be the guy. Now, you're going to pay him $10 million, he's probably going to be the starter.
Right.
Okay? Because that's kind of telling you, coach goes, Moore is okay, but he ain't the guy. I'd rather go with Jay Cutler. And basically, coach is saying, hey, you know what? It's on me. It's on me. I know this guy. I'm bringing him in. And the players are going, if coach is bringing him in, we're good. He wouldn't do this if he didn't think this guy could play.
Mike and Herman is here. If Cutler, how far would you have gone if Vinny had said, listen, I really don't feel like it. I'm not, what did you need to hear from him that made you feel like I can have confidence in this, that this is now again, you had zero options at that point. It was into the season already, and you lost two quarterbacks. They're not in that situation right now. But Golic was bringing up earlier, is this something where Jay just kind of money talked him into doing it? He doesn't really want to do it in his heart. What did you have to hear to know, this guy's in?
Well, I think the relationship you have with him as a coach. I mean, this went on with Carson Palmer when he retired. Remember?
Yes.
He retired. And coach,
Hugh
Jackson was in Oakland. He said, hey, man, you got to come back. And everybody, and he came back, and it was awful. And then actually, after the Raiders situation, you said, he's done. Mm-hmm. Right? We said Carson Palmer's done.
Yep.
And we said, it's awful. He's done, right? And then he goes to Arizona. Ended up being pretty good.
Yeah.
And so I just think you have a relationship with this guy, and look, Jay's not going, he goes to a place where he's going, I'm going to a pretty good team. They went into the playoffs last year. Now everybody's questioning that. Are they a playoff team or did they have a good season? This is a typical NFL team. They're 8-2 in games 7 or less. Well, that's 30 to 40 plays. They don't make those plays. Guess what? They're 6-10, right? So we're going to find out this year. Well, Jay gives them a chance offensively. Defensively, they still got some holes, right? They're the 29th in total defense, 30th against the run. Now, they go out and get Timmons. They draft 5 of the 7 players on defense to help the defense. Offensively, we got Landry. We got Ajay. Hopefully he's going to be okay. You got a couple receivers we like but are always injured. Parker, right? He's injured. Steele is injured. Julius Thomas they bring in. He hasn't played up to his ability. So this is kind of an interesting football team.
From the other side of it with Colin Kaepernick, from a head coach relationship with a GM relationship with an owner, in your opinion, does every team already basically have the scenario played out whether they would take Kaepernick or not?
Yeah, and I think the teams that would like to have his services to compete at the position are being hamstrung by their owner. Look, guys, this is real simple. Whenever you hear it's an organizational decision, basically it's the owner. Okay? We said this before. I mean, look, there's 110 quarterbacks in camp. He's not one of them. No, that's just to compete. They ain't letting the guy compete for whatever reason. And for me, it's real simple. It's business. It's all about business. And they're worried about the uproar, which we've seen before in other situations where players have kind of, lost their way. They've had some transgressions. We have players in this league with transgressions now. We have people in the front office that has transgressions and have gotten second opportunities. This guy is not getting one. Now, We're basically every week saying if somebody gets hurt, he's going to get a chance, right? We're actually saying if somebody's got to get hurt to get this guy a chance. 110 quarterbacks in there. He can't compete. It's kind of interesting.
No, there's no mystery about what's going on here. Bomani Jones said this morning he will be surprised if Colin Kaepernick ever plays another NFL game. Would you be surprised?
Ooh, I hope that's not the case. I would be surprised. Look, we can say what we want. The rookie of the year was Robert Griffin. He's sitting at home too.
Right. Totally different circumstance, but yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So it can happen that fast in this league. But the quarterback, I mean, that's one of those deals there. We see a lot of guys that are on some rosters right now, and I'm not going to call in the amount. You're going, really? That guy's the third guy, and this guy, and we've heard every excuse. He's too good to be the backup.
Right.
Really? Or here's another one. The coaches use this all the time. Well, if we get him, we got to change our system. Let me tell you a little story. When you lose the first guy, you change your system anyway. It don't matter who the second guy is. He ain't the same guy.
The best of Mike and Mike.
So last Friday, Tom Brady finally responding to his wife's saying on television during the offseason that Brady, suffered a concussion during the last football season, which had never been reported. Brady saying he said a lot of words, but the ones that really mattered was he said, that's really nobody's business. Our Bob Lee, who's about as respected a voice as there is in sports, responded on television yesterday by saying the words, the hell it isn't, which is, for Bob, that's extremely strong.
Yes.
So, Herman, where are we with that? What do we make of Brady, whether it's, the privacy of his own health, which, of course, everyone understands and regards, the significance of the head injury topic. He's got it sort of in between his wife and the coach and everyone else on a subject like this. What is your take?
Well, my take is a player is naturally going to protect his career and himself. He's never, publicly going to state, hey, this is what I got. I've had concussions. I think at the end of your career, we can all look back and say, have we had a few? Yeah. Mike, you probably had some.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I've had some, and we weren't, the protocol wasn't as extensive as it is now, obviously in the era I played in, probably as well as you, Mike, and rightly right. So. But I think with this new protocol that we understand that we think is important for the players, for the protection of the players, because you got to protect them from themselves, right. Most players are going to deny they've had concussions. And I think it starts all the way now in high school and college. Because if that is a rap sheet, if that becomes on your rap sheet as a player, you've been concussed numerous times, guess what's going to happen when it comes time to draft you? People are going to say, hey, you know what? This guy's been concussed a bunch of times. Maybe he's not a first-round pick. Maybe he's a fifth-round pick now, right? I mean, I'm just telling you that's how players think. I mean, that's the mindset of a player.
But boy, does that set up a bad self-fulfilling
I'm just telling you, that's what happens.
And that's the way it's been for decades. That doesn't mean things should change. And I think what will be interesting, Herm, because I agree with you. I said to get to the majority of players admitting they have some sort of injury, I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
But do I think some will do it more? Yes, because we've had more 30 and unders retire from the game of football. So I'm waiting for this new kind of wave of players to come through that are learning to tackle better. Coaches are being taught better of how to coach. And the next wave of coming through with everybody mindful of all that's going on. If we see a difference in that, if we see coaches with a quicker pull on someone, if we see parents get more involved, if players, and that's the big one, if players start to do it more, start to say, hey, I've got a situation here, I may need to come out. I don't ever see a majority of players doing it because playing that game, part of it is playing that game and just playing through things. And I don't think a lot of that's ever going to change. But it will be interesting with the new crop of players coming through under this era of where we are with head injuries if you see that number increase.
And you make a great point, Mike, and the fact that, they won't be looked upon as that, they're not tough.
Right.
No, they are tough. They just understand there's circumstances involved in this now, and it's bigger than just you. It's your life beyond football. And most of these guys, if you look at the numbers and the ages, most guys that play football, it ends for most of them when they're 23 years old, right? I mean, from high school to college to at 24 years old, your career's over for the most part. Now, the guys that continue to play, they have a platform to speak on, and I think the more that professionals speak on it, it really sends a great message to the younger guys saying, oh, okay, he said, well, I can say it, but here again, I go back to this. You have a series of these things happening to you, players, just their instinct is, I don't want people to know, right? Because I want to play.
See, the thing that happens, Greeny, along what he's saying is we can get to that point, I guess I should say, more players may get to that point and may not be looked down upon like it would have been in our eras. But if it's still held against them, then they're going to clam up again.
That's exactly right.
If it's held against them, just as Herm said, when you say, well, he's got a history of it, so they're not going to, maybe he won't be playing here, or maybe he won't get that offer there, or maybe I better keep him on the bench. If it starts to affect their play, then what does the player think? All right, well, I can either not do this anymore or I'm going to shut up. So you can get players, some more players starting to be cognizant of it and bring it up. But if it costs them, then it'll just go back the other way.
Well, so that is a self-fulfilling prophecy now, right? I mean, that's something that's a system that just continues to feed itself in a negative way. And that's sort of, so I guess, Herman, as a last question I have for you in the minute that we have remaining, does someone like Tom Brady, who doesn't have that to worry about, whose legacy and place in the history of the sport is secure and has made, unimaginable fortune and fame from the game, would you have liked to have seen him step up a little bit and sent that message to young people?
I'm not surprised what Tom Brady said. Not one bit. He's probably been concussed in his – as long as he's played, he's probably had some now, guys. Okay, look, I'm not going to sit here and be naive now.
Right.
I get it. I mean, I understand it, and in certain players – and most of the guys aren't going to say it. They're going to say, you know what? No, I'm okay. Look, and what's a concussion? What's the extent of it? I mean, what do we consider a concussion? I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, right? But I think most players are protective of themselves. Because here's what happens, Greeny. When you know a player is a little bit woozy and he's in the game, you've seen it, you're like, oh, okay, we got him. I mean, that's like, okay, let's attack the injury, right?
Him. Yeah.
I mean, that's the game. I hate to say it, but it's the game. I mean, the players check the injury list every week. Oh, the guy got a knee. Oh, he got a shoulder. Hey, how's your shoulder? Oh, I don't know. Boom, hit him in the shoulder right before first play of the game. Hit the guy in the shoulders. Oh, his shoulder's still bothering him.
The best of Mike and Mike.
We are Mike and Mike, and we get to do a lot of really cool things here, and every once in a while we really look forward to, and this is one of those. For those of you who know our show, you know that for about 3 years, Aaron Rodgers was referred to exclusively as Aaron on our show, and that was because of the genius of Key and Peele, and Keegan-Michael Key is here with a bunch of new projects to talk about. It is such a delight to have you here. We're both huge fans. How are you?
I'm doing great this morning, you guys. It's a real pleasure for me to be here.
We played that so much. We talk about it so much. But for you, I mean, because that was a while ago. So we start by talking about it. Is there a part of your mind that said, all right, let's move on.
Let's move on to the next thing.
Let's move on to the next thing, okay?
It's funny because it's you want to always celebrate it because it's one of the things that put us on the map. I remember my manager called me maybe 3 years ago on Thanksgiving, and he just on the phone he goes, have you seen the hits on YouTube for the substitute teacher? And I went, no. And at the time it might have been 12 million hits. It's like 120 now or 140. Yeah. And so, and I said, and that's when he knew, like Golk, we were just talking about word of mouth for a piece of entertainment. And that's when we knew something was happening, that something was starting to happen.
The whole Key and Peele thing. What, if there's one thing, is that the one that most people will quote to you? There's all the college football names. Yeah. Which is the one thing you will get the most when people walk up to you in the street?
That's the thing. The second I get above 23rd Street, New York City, I live in New York City, the second I get anywhere near, even sniffing Midtown, hey, Ron! Hey, Ron! You just start hearing people just screaming at you across the street. New Yorkers, they don't care. They're just like, there he is. Yeah. You're hilarious. Hey, Ron, there's the guy. There's the funny guy. It's just that nobody needs to stop you or take selfies. If a person wants to take a selfie, they're a tourist. If they're in New York, like, good for you. So just keep going. All right.
You guys, and I want to talk, you have two fascinating projects you're working on right now, including one that will be very near and dear to
dear to my heart. It's big in the household all the time. Yeah.
Because of his love of Shakespeare. Yeah. But Billy Shakespeare, Mike, is a well-known writer.
It's friends.
But the Key and Peele, you guys were so monumentally significant. I mean, it was the ultimate in water cooler conversation, and you were the cover of magazines and all that kind of stuff. And it felt like you kind of walked away at the very top of it. And I've never had a chance to ask you, what made you guys decide to make that creative decision at a time when it felt like you were at your very most relevant?
Well, for me personally, I would have to say, because I'm such a huge Barry Sanders fan, being from Detroit, you should just quit at the top of your game. No,
now you can add Calvin Johnson in that
Calvin
too,
Johnson,
huh? Yeah.
Calvin Johnson. That's our new thing that we do in Detroit. We would sit in the office sometimes, and we'd be exhausted and kind of not figuring out why we were exhausted. And then we realized we both were working on other projects on the side. What was happening is when you create a show and you're the head writers of the show and you're the stars of the show and the producers of the show, that was like 10 and a half months out of our year. And anytime we were on hiatus, which would be a week here or a week there, 3 weeks here, I would just fly someplace to go make a movie. And I realized it wasn't going to be sustainable. And then one day, just sitting in the office, we both said, Jordan just looked at me and goes, you feel like we're getting toward the end here? And I said, I think we're almost done. And it was mutual without us having even discussed it. And it seemed like we were just kind of symbiotic in that way. And all of a sudden we both said, we both want to pursue other things. We wanted to pursue other things and start to spread our wings in other ways. Spread our wings in some ways, go back home in other ways. And Jordan, his mind is bubbling with ideas all the time. And he wanted to write and produce. He wanted to get out back behind the camera.
But
it worked out pretty well.
Being the operative word.
In him and Get Out, he was hilarious in that. Yeah,
I mean, he's just amazing. For him to have been able to take a dream of his, a passion of his, which is horror movies, and take that whole genre and flip it. And I mean, to make a $5 million film and make $250 million
worked out okay.
It worked out okay.
Pretty
The breakup worked out okay. Good job, John Lennon. Let's see if I can McCartney it over here.
Keegan-Michael Key is with us. One other thing before we get to the current stuff that I was just fascinated by, because when you performed at the White House Correspondents' Dinner doing, what was the exact wording? The angry President Obama?
Yeah, so his name is Luther, the anger translator. The president's anger translator, yes.
How much pressure is that? Because, I mean, you've got the president sitting right there, and, you know, I think everyone is going to take their cue from him as to whether it's funny or not.
Yeah.
Just how much pressure was there in that performance?
There was more pressure in the rehearsal, but after I rehearsed it with him in the West Wing. Once we finished the rehearsal, I was okay for the rest of the show. But by the way, before I got to the rehearsal, I had memorized all of the lines. His lines and my lines. I figured he's got his mind on other things like running the entire world. So maybe I should just in case he gets tripped up. But we started doing the rehearsal, and in the rehearsal, he said, "Come on, Key, this is funny stuff, but you gotta keep it together." And I was like, "Yes, sir, I will keep it together." So he utters his first line, then I utter my first line. And then he cracks up.
Yeah.
And I was like, come on, sir. And he's like, I messed it up. That was on me. We broke the ice there. And then by the time he got out on the dais, it still felt dreamy. You know, I was like they introduced me, and I just walked out there, and I went, we're doing it. Well, there's no turning back now. I'm walking on the stage. There's no turning back now. But his energy, his comic timing was amazing. I couldn't, to be that good of a straight man, it's tough to be a straight man. He was terrific.
Was there, this is off limits, this is off limits, anything you couldn't do?
No, we actually, the writing beforehand, because it was, I would say because it was pretty tepid what the cycle was at that point in time, we could make fun of just about anything we wanted at that time. It was pretty carte blanche right there, yeah.
Things have changed a little. Keegan-Michael Key in studio with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. Okay, 2 different projects going on right now, including the Netflix series, which, as you were just describing to us, is really shot almost as a film.
Yes.
Friends from College,
yes. So Nick Stoller, great comedy director, he and his wife put together this series, and it's been an absolute blast. I'm in it. Kobe Smulders from How I Met Your Mother's in it. Fred Savage from Wonder Years fame, and he wanted to make it like a film. He wanted to design a program that would be for binging. So it's not a self-contained thing. You kind of, once you start watching it, it's like potato chips. You want to keep on going because it's every plot of every episode is threaded into the next episode, because it's really just ostensibly a 4.5-hour movie. Yeah, but I think that Netflix is starting to do more and more of that kind of programming where it's not self-contained episodic episodes. It's more like long movies.
I am a big if binge watching Put on Weight, I'd be 500 pounds because this is now made for me to binge watch.
This is for you, Google. This is designed for you.
Yeah. What is the show? Tell us about the show.
So the show is about a group of 6 friends from college. They're a really close friend group, which is the term everybody's been using now. I didn't even know when that came around. Friend group, a friend group. So this friend group, there are 4 people that live in New York City and Manhattan, a couple that moved from Michigan to New York City, and now all the friends are back together again in one place. One of the wrinkles would be that the lead character I play, his name's Ethan Turner. He's married to Kobe Smolder's character, but he's been having an affair with another character. They've been hooking up for like 20 years. And he's been married for 10 years. So what happens is in the middle of all these hookups in this relationship, he'd travel to Chicago once a year. They'd have a little fling.
Right.
But now they live within about 60 miles of each other. And now it's like, how are we going to work this out? And that on top of the fact that they're all kind of trying to grasp what it feels like and means to be 40. They're trying to come to terms with children and their lives, and then playing the old tapes and acting like idiots when they're with each other. When you see your old friends from college, you're like, I'm 20 again. I'm 20. Yeah. What the hell? I'm making these stupid decisions. What's wrong with me? And it's all that encompassed, and it's really wacky and zany, but also there's some good kind of dark, poignant stuff in it too.
It's on Netflix right now. It's available. Friends from College with our new friend Keegan-Michael Key. And then you are also currently at the Public Theater in New York City, which for those who don't know it around the country is an extraordinarily accomplished theater.
Yeah.
Hamilton started there. A lot of really, really well-known
My
stuff.
second home.
And you're doing...
Looks there all the time.
Oh. And of all times, this would be the time because he's doing Shakespeare.
Willie
Shakespeare.
Willie S. Yeah. You're a big old Willie S.
He's doing Hamlet. What was the last time you had Shakespeare month at the house? When you guys do your readings.
Talking about Omelet or Hamlet?
No, Hamlet.
Hamlet.
Not Omelet.
Hamlet, Mike. Yeah.
I think probably last year we had Hamlet month in the Golick house. All the kids had to write.
That's
a paper.
when you emailed me with the invitation,
exactly,
right? Exactly. Because we were going to also just that was the appetizer. Then for the full meal, we are going to do Lear and do like a little Coriolanus or Winter's Tale for the dessert, right?
Yeah.
Was that right? Yeah.
Whatever you said. Yeah.
He doesn't mean Norman Lear, by the way.
I was just going to say, how did Norman Lear get into this one?
A whole other discussion. But most people who don't know much about you would not associate the guy who was the substitute teacher with doing Shakespeare. Is that sort of dramatic acting always been a part of the repertoire?
Yes, that's my training. That's my training. I was trained as a dramatic actor when I was younger, and I ended up. Once I got out of school, I ended up going on this 19-year detour into sketch comedy. I had no idea that was going to be what my life was. It's worked out pretty well, but being at the Public is like coming home. It's a dream come true, but it's also like coming home because it's getting back to the Shakespeare work, the dramatic work, and it's a direction we're kind of pushing the boat in right now. And it's a beautiful space. And this is also, this is the theater where Shakespeare in the Park started. When people go to Central Park and see the free Shakespeare every year, and the amazing Oscar Isaac is playing the titular role of Hamlet, and he is absolutely amazing. Here's what's amazing about Oscar. He knows the language so well and knows the play so well that the way that he does it is so accessible that even someone like you, Greeny, can understand it. Golick knows this stuff in his sleep.
Well,
but someone like you, Greeny, could really
could
understand it. Right? It's been made to be very 21st century, very grounded, and the language I didn't know. I was like, is that what he's been saying all these years? But
that's the thing. Yeah,
you know what I mean.
How they say it all, I just can't deal with.
And part of it is sometimes you can't.
I don't understand it.
How do you get all those words out of your mouth?
Why can't they just speak English?
That's right.
Maybe if I went to the show sober, I'd be okay.
That's why you enjoyed it so much, right?
So there are 2 different ways that you can see Keegan-Michael Key now. For the next month or thereabouts through the early September, if you're in New York, he's doing Hamlet at the Public Theater, which I'm sure is sensational. I would love to come to that. And available right now on Netflix, Friends from College. You can download and binge watch the entire thing.
Oh, man, I'll be doing that. I want to ask real quick, for your profession, what has Netflix done? For being TV, started on stage, we talked about, but then TV to where Netflix has taken everybody kind of to the next level.
From our side of the industry, what Netflix has done has allowed the actor the opportunity to play bigger, more fleshed out characters. Because as I said, especially Friends from College, this new movement of making a show, designing a show to be binge worthy is what allows us to play a character. Like every actor wants to be in a 4-hour movie. Most actors are. Just by the time you see it in the theater, it's been cut down to 2 hours or 98 minutes.
Right.
So we're now given this opportunity to do all different kinds of varied work. And because Netflix, as I was saying earlier, they got this great kind of throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks mode of action that they use. And I think it's really helpful for us because we get to play different types of characters, different varied kind of roles on a really legitimate platform. And that's what it means for the actor specifically, is that you get to play exciting roles, tell stories that we've not been able to tell before, and they've provided us that opportunity.
What a treat this is to have you here. Best of luck with it all.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you so much for coming.
This has been fantastic. Everybody go to that In-N-Out. That In-N-Out by the
seriously,
school.
I mean, who's not?
Who doesn't want to go? Why is there ever? There shouldn't even be a discussion about this.
Never.
Yeah,
I don't care where it is.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.